Have you ever read the original fairy tale? There's a summary in the description below. Puss-In-Boots. Once upon a time, there was a miller who was so poor that when he died he had only 3 things to leave his 3 sons. To the eldest son, the miller left his mill. To the second son, he left his hard-working donkey. But all he had to leave to his handsome youngest son was his cat. "What good is a cat to me?" the youngest son said unhappily. "How will I ever make my fortune in the world?" "Don't worry, young master," Puss purred. "I will make your fortune for you." "You?" the unhappy boy asked. "What can you do?" "Trust me," said Puss. "Just get me a big sack and a pair of strong boots, and you will soon see." Still doubtful, the young man found a pair of boots and a sack for his cat. In a few minutes, Puss in Boots set out through the forest to make his master's fortune. Puss ran swiftly in his fine boots through the forest and into the fields. Soon he spied in the tall grass just the thing he was looking for, a fine, plump rabbit. Quietly, Puss put down his sack and sprinkled some sweet-smelling greens inside. Then he lay down and waited. In no time, the rabbit's nose began twitching, and he wiggled into the sack. "Caught you!" shouted Puss happily as he pounced on the sack, closed it tight, and carried the rabbit off to the royal palace. He sneaked inside the palace and soon stood before the king. "If it please your majesty, my master has sent you this fine rabbit as a present," Puss in Boots said meekly. "And who may your master be?" thundered the king. "My master is the Marquis of Carabas," answered the cat. "His rich lands stretch far and wide beyond your kingdom." His Majesty was delighted because kings enjoy presents just as much as ordinary people do. Every day after that, Puss stopped in to visit the king and share a goblet of royal cocoa. Every day, he brought a different present: a pair of colorful pheasants, a dozen peacock eggs, or a fine speckled trout. And as he presented each to the king, he would announce loudly, "I bring you this gift from my master, the Marquis of Carabas." One morning, Puss learned that the king and his beautiful daughter were setting out on a trip to visit neighboring kingdoms. As soon as he heard of the news, Puss rushed back to the mill to find his master. "Come quickly, master," he called, and made the young man follow him to the river bank. "Now," said Puss, "take off your clothes and jump in the river." "But why?" asked his master. "It's too cold to go swimming." "Trust me," answered Puss. So the young man threw off his shirt and jumped in. The frogs watched in astonishment as he shivered in the cold water. Puss quickly hid his master's ragged shirt under a rock and then sat looking down the road. Puss waited until the royal coach appeared and he could see the king and princess. Then he rushed toward the coach screaming, Marquis of Carabas is a fine and noble person. Save him immediately, he shouted to his footmen. The fat old footman jumped from the coach and threw a rope into the water. As soon as the miller's son caught it, the footman, huffing and puffing, pulled him into the shore. The princess ordered the footman back to the palace to get dry clothing. Bring furs and velvets, the poor man is freezing, she added, noticing that the young man was very handsome. While they waited, Puss ran ahead into the rich lands of the neighboring kingdom, which was really owned by a terrible ogre. Whenever he saw workers in the fields, Puss called out, "When the king passes, you must say this land belongs to the Marquis of Carabas. If not, my master will chop you into mincemeat." So, as the coach passed through the ogre's kingdom, the king called out to ask, "Whose land is this?" All who heard him called back, "This land belongs to the Marquis of Carabas." The king was very impressed. Meanwhile, Puss rushed ahead to the castle of the rich ogre. He smiled sweetly when he stood before the terrible fellow, for he had a shrewd plan. "Grrr," roared the ogre. "What do you want?" "I've heard you can change yourself into a lion. Can you really?" Puss asked slyly. "Watch," shouted the ogre. In a flash, he became a roaring lion. Puss was terrified, but managed to wait until the lion changed back into an ogre again. "Not bad," said Puss, "but I'll bet you couldn't turn into something small. A mouse, for instance." "Watch again," roared the ogre. In an instant, he became a squeaking mouse. "Perfect," cried Puss, happily, as he pounced on the mouse and ate it. At that moment, the royal coach was approaching the castle. During the ride, the king had decided that the Marquis of Carabas was a very rich man, and the golden-haired princess had discovered that she was in love with the handsome lad, and he was in love with her. When Puss heard the coach, he rushed to the castle gate. "Welcome, your majesties," he said breathlessly. Then he turned to the miller's son and winked at him. "Welcome home, my master, Marquis of Carabas," he said proudly. "Your banquet is waiting." So with Puss leading the way, the royal party entered the ogre's castle, which now belonged to the miller's son. As the royal guests enjoyed themselves at the splendid banquet which had been prepared for the ogre and his friends, the king announced joyfully, "My daughter, the princess and the Marquis of Carabas, will be married in 2 days." After the wedding, the beautiful princess and the miller's son, now the rich Marquis of Carabas, sailed away on their honeymoon. Of course, they took along their faithful cat, Puss-In-Boots.